You just couldn't let me go, could you? This is what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. You truly are incorruptible, aren't you? Huh? You won't kill me out of some misplaced sense of self-righteousness. And I won't kill you because you're just too much fun. I think you and I are destined to do this forever.
In life, you experience a lot of losses that happen. Whether that's losing a best friend because they're moving, losing a family member because of death, or losing at a sporting event, these types of defeats can really traumatize us all if we don't heal properly from them. But what truly hurts is the losses you never saw coming, even from your so-called best friend. One of the biggest angles done often in professional wrestling is the breakup or the betrayal. When two wrestlers in a tag team or faction start to have issues and different paths they want to walk on. Bruno Sammartino and Larry Zbyszko, Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio, and probably the most famous betrayal of them all, Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty. Marty Jannetty's career on a downward spiral while Shawn Michaels rose to the top and became one of the greatest in-ring performers of all time, even at the expense of his former rocker friend. Not every single betrayal has this particular outcome, as both people can come across as equals once the rivalry begins. Today, I want to talk about one of my favorite rivalries presented by one of the best wrestling companies of all time, even with their future looking pretty bleak at the moment, so hopefully they do come back. I believe it's nice to reminisce about one of its greatest stories that they've ever done. I am going to talk about the on-again, off-again relationship of Kevin Steen and El Generico. Ring of Honor is a professional wrestling company that started back in 2002. The company was founded after RF Video, a pro wrestling distribution company, needed a new promotion to help with their sales after ECW folded back in 2001. The first show actually taking place on February 23rd in 2002, about 20 years ago since that happened, if you can believe it. It was the biggest independent professional wrestling company at the time, where all of the biggest indie stars came to showcase their craft with some of the best matches in history taking place. Names like, of course, CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, Samoa Joe, Christopher Daniels, AJ Styles, the Briscoe brothers, and yeah, you get the point. Even during some of their down years, Ring of Honor has produced some of the best quality of wrestling matches ever produced on television. As this promotion was growing and starting to come into its own, so were two young aspiring wrestlers from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Two lives that were truly about to be changed forever.
Ole, 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 ole.
El Generico on the surface is quite the silly gimmick to have in professional wrestling. Known as the generic luchador, he is known for his trademark ole that he does every time with the crowd, fake Spanish speaking skills, and overall great sense of humor that connected him to audiences across all the independents. His playful, upbeat style helped him grow in popularity, especially since his character was based off the popular lucha libre culture that started to really expand into the US, back around the time WCW and ECW started to showcase the cruiserweight division to American audiences. He comes out in a silly cape and generic looking mask, while being this wholesome guy who runs his own orphanage as well, although he has admitted in the past to eating children.
I ain't children!
It was obvious to many people who saw him perform live that he was the most non-looking luchador they've ever seen in their lives. I mean, he is Canadian, playing as a masked man for God's sake, but I don't believe people cared. They wanted him to succeed because he was a generally lovable guy that they related to. They could also see his ability to tell a great story in the ring. There was another guy from Canada who also started his career around about the same time as El Generico. However, he was someone that did not care what people thought of him, and also someone who took things a little bit more seriously. This is Kevin Steen, the other side of the coin in this story. Kevin grew up playing sports and watching professional wrestling as a young teen. He started his training at age 14 after being inspired to learn English as a young kid by watching, of course, Monday Night Raw. Kevin was different for a variety of reasons from his generic counterpart because on the surface, people do tend to look at him and think, well, I mean, well, how's the nicest way I can put this?
He's fat!
Thank you, Scott Steiner, for your wonderful contributions to the world. Despite his size, however, he proved that he was able to use a variety of moves and even showing off his own high-flying skills as well, making him a very dangerous competitor. His trainer even at one point knew he was so good that he refused to have Kevin lose a match. He was someone who wanted to win at all costs. Someone who would later on in his career become sort of a prize fighter. This did not mean that he wasn't capable of having any personality, as he was someone who can also come across as being a sarcastic asshole while also having some funny bits with the other wrestlers. The problem that Kevin had with his trainer was that the style of wrestling that was taught to him is very, well,
Boring.
the training was very repetitive. And Rougeau would even force his students to not attend other wrestling shows at all. So one day, Kevin, being the rebellious young man that he was, decided to sneak into an IWS show in Montreal, where for the very first time, he saw El Generico wrestle. He saw a man who would become one of his best friends, and was even seen in the crowd going crazy over an outside springboard moonsault.
He was marking out, man!
They connected instantly, wrestling together, traveling together, working the independents, and feeling like actual professional wrestlers. They toured in different promotions like IWS, CZW, Shikara, and PWG, just to name a few. I won't bore you guys with all the details since there is a great fun writing piece about this whole rivalry and its upstart's beginnings by JJ McGee. This is a great article that really recaps the story as well between Kevin Steen and El Generico, so I just wanted to take some time to shout this article out, and I will leave a link to that down below in the description. But of course, you know I want to get my own personal take on this rivalry as well, as it does mean something to me. Even after fighting each other for most of their times in the indies, the two of them decided to go to the biggest and most important indie promotion of them all, Ring of Honor, and the formation of their tag team, Generico, which they didn't really acknowledge until later, but they had to come up with something. I mean, we had Brad, Jolena, and stuff like that, so yeah, it's a cute little tie-on, you know, it's better than just having them with nothing. Generico is an odd couple kind of tag team, kind of similar to the Rock and Sock connection. They don't really take themselves too seriously outside the ring with their own goofy antics, but when the lights are on, they are able to shine together as a team. Full of great teamwork ability, such as Generico's drop toe hold into a Steen standing 450 leg drop, and their own finishing maneuver, the assembly line. Kevin Steen with his devastating package pile driver that gets rolled into a brainbuster, which is enough to put anyone away. This connection between the two Canadian boys leads to some excellent tag matches against teams like the American Wolves, the Motor City Machine Guns, and of course their rivalry with the Briscoes, with the best match between the two teams being Ladder War back in 2007. Much like the Rock and Mankind's odd couple relationship, Steen was always verbally and sometimes physically abusive towards his partner, while Generico just kind of brushed it off because of his nice demeanor. He at least had someone in his life he could depend on, and he did not want to let that go. even if Kevin sometimes wasn't the nicest person to him on camera. Nearly a year later in 2008, fans started to get more and more behind Generico and the dynamic relationship between the two, as they are set to face the Briscoes once again, this time for the ROH World Tag Team titles, and eventually get their rematch against the Age of the Fall at ROH's Driven in Boston, where after a miscue from Tyler Black, knocking out his own partner Jimmy Jacobs by mistake, Steen and Generico follow up and win the Ring of Honor World Tag Team titles. They did it together, the best of friends, hitting the apex of tag team wrestling and enjoying the moment as one, almost like it was for the very first time. Eventually they drop the tag titles and start to hit a limbo as a tag team. They truly were never supposed to win the belts looking back on it, but because of accidents and coincidence, they did. They did all that because the fans finally started to believe in them, that they could finally do it. More so Generico than Steen. Steen realizes that his time is starting to pass him by. He's been dealing with injuries now for years. Mr. Wrestling was finally on his last legs. There have been times where Kevin has stated in interviews that there were dark times in his life where he wanted to give up wrestling altogether. How after his first day in wrestling school, after taking all those bumps, that maybe this kind of stuff wasn't for him. Maybe this was all a little bit too much for him to handle. He is comforted by his friend who wants to make this work, but he himself is not sure if any of this is going to work out anymore. But El Generico believes in his heart that his best friend can pull through and help them win the titles one more time. Because Generico could always keep going. He always had a heart and a drive and a passion for wrestling that Kevin at this point in his life just couldn't match. He could not keep up with that drive that his friend had. At Final Battle 2009, they are set to have a tag team match against an up-and-coming tag team named the Young Bucks. The Young Bucks are, for all intents and purposes, the greatest independent professional wrestling tag team of the 2010s. I know by saying that I just pissed off a majority of the IWC, but I don't care. Go outside, you losers. Kevin looks awful in his physical appearance during this match. He is set to take a year off from wrestling to heal from his injuries. He doesn't even start the match, but quietly walks towards his corner and stands there while Generico is slow to get out the gates. He eventually tries to tag in without much enthusiasm about it. Eventually, he starts to get more and more into this match. He can't help it. He's a fighter. Generico trying so hard, but the Bucks are too young, too arrogant, and on this night, just too good. They counter every move Generico has to offer. Even as they try to get going with something, when they finally think there's a bit of momentum in this match, the Bucks are there to finally cut them off one more time. Kevin Steen, seeing all those memories of the two flooding back, all those times that they were on top together, tries desperately to fight back and win the match for his team, but it becomes too overwhelming, and the Bucks finally end the misery with a series of super kicks as Kevin finally stays down and takes the loss. After the match is over, the emotion comes pouring out of Kevin. He talks about all the years Generico and him traveled the road together, how much they've teamed and fought each other, how much wrestling has meant to Kevin over the years. He thanks everyone who has helped him along the way, and to the fans for believing in what he was doing, and how much they appreciated all the work that he's put in to become one of the best independent performers throughout that decade. And then he turns towards his partner, his best friend. He starts to explain something to this masked man, but before he can get it all out, El Generico gives his best friend a big hug. And Kevin embraces this emotional moment as the crowd cheer on. And then Kevin says 5 words. 5 simple words that would change both of their lives forever.
I hate your fucking guts.
The crowd gasps in a mixture of horror and sadness over what they just saw. Generico staring at Kevin in shock as he sees his friend bash his brains in with a chair. Kevin walks away, laughing like a maniac. What happened here? Why, Kevin? Why?
You want me to explain why I attacked El Generico?
He's lost it. He's gone. He tricked us all. He was never truly hurt physically. He was just tired emotionally. Tired of Generico. Tired of the losing. Just tired. He finally did something about it and expressed his own free will to becoming what he always wanted to be. A star. However, because of the turmoil that he supposedly endured during his time with Generico, he's lost something along the way. He's lost his sense of sanity. This moment was Kevin's descent into madness. His unpredictability, the love and emotion that he felt from his partner drove him crazy. Now everyone in Ring of Honor was going to feel his wrath. Kevin explains that Generico is like an addiction to him. He was someone who he always relied and depended on, but rather as a friend, he started to see Generico as a way to bring him down. Kevin was like a recovering alcoholic and needed to get away from Generico because he started to believe in his own paranoia that El Generico was actually the one trying to hurt him this whole time, and that he was becoming like an abused wife who stayed in a toxic relationship because they loved him and they wanted to make it work out. And that's what Generico wanted to try and do throughout the first few months of 2010. He wanted to understand why his best friend would do such a thing. He was crushed and heartbroken, and he did not know how to handle that kind of rejection. He still believes in his best friend, but his former friend did not share those same kind of feelings. Kevin instead looks to guidance from his own mentor, the king of old school, Steve Corino, one of the most despised villains in all of wrestling. Steve knew how much potential Kevin truly had and convinced him that Generico was the one holding him back. He ruined that friendship because now he wanted to share in the glory of the new Kevin Steen, the one who stopped using his wrestling and natural ability and started using brawling type tactics and pure, unadulterated violence to win. Meanwhile, Generico finds a different kind of comfort in the form of Colt Cabana. Colt was always one of those guys who loved to have a good time and show off his great comedy skills in the ring. He was always a fan favorite wherever he went because of his natural charm and abilities to make a crowd laugh at his jokes. And here he was, actually showing a more serious and determined side not seen since his own rivalry with Homicide. How that bloody rivalry was coming back to light, especially since it involved both of his close friends that he cared about and also shared the road with. He confronts Kevin about his actions, who keeps blowing him off, and tries to convince Generico that Kevin has turned into a bad guy and that he needs to stand up for himself. Generico wants to do what's right, but cannot get himself to focus, even picking up some humiliating losses along the way. When he finally has a chance to confront Kevin himself and do what's right, he just can't do it. That's his best friend. He's still emotional about the whole situation, as Kevin takes advantage and clocks his former tag partner with vicious and devastating strikes. He wants to move on from his past, but Generico won't let him. Every time the two meet, Steve is there to escalate the situation while Colt tries to convince Generico to fight back. It's starting to become too much for him, and Kevin begins to rise in the ranks with his new vicious style, even earning a Ring of Honor World title shot against Tyler Black, but ends up coming up short. Despite this setback, Kevin has started to trend upwards in his career, while Generico is spiraling out of control. It's Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels all over again. Eventually, the abuse he takes becomes too much, and he starts to get angry, and more angry, and he is pushed too far one day, and he finally fights back, hitting his former best friend, with strikes of vengeance. And that whole year becomes a series of matches between the pair, full of pain, blood, and even some quite disturbing imagery. All this continues for the entirety of 2010, Kevin continuing to proclaim that this is over between himself and Generico, whereas his former friend now wants to kill him and constantly cause him to suffer. Eventually, Ring of Honor officials and the committee believe that this rivalry has gone too far, and it has to end one way or another. So a proposition is made. 1 year since the betrayal. 1 year since this all started. Final battle, 2010. Mask versus career. If Kevin lost, he would leave Ring of Honor. But if Generico loses, he has to unmask. In the Lucha Libre culture, the mask is considered sacred. Someone who loses these kinds of matches being forced to unmask takes away the uniqueness about them, and most luchadors end up retiring or disappearing if they lose. So Generico losing this match more than likely means he ends up leaving the promotion. Kevin even goes so far as to taking that mask away during one of their brutal encounters, and using it to taunt his former friend. In the lead up to this unsanctioned final battle, Kevin talks about how much he wants to get rid of the mask forever, because it was just making him sick, just like his former friend started to make him sick. He wanted to end this once and for all because he believed he was right to let him go. Generico, on the other hand, always did what was right, always did everything for his people, and Kevin always treated it as a joke. A man who he thought was always by his side, now was finally starting to see him for what he truly was. He even donned a black mask that night when the match finally arrived. They were the lights out main event of the evening because Ring of Honor themselves did not want to be held responsible for what was about to happen. And what happens is simply pure chaos. Every move, every act, every part of the match where you think it's over and the two keep fighting and hurting each other. After all this violence, all this suffering, finally, Generico has the upper hand. 1 year ago, Kevin Steen ended their friendship by cracking El Generico in the head with a steel chair. Now Generico was about to do the same. Kevin's career was starting to flash before his very eyes, and in a last-ditch, desperate attempt to rekindle the flame between the two, he presents Generico with his old mask. A way of trying to mend the relationship between the two. A way to be back together once again. But this time, Generico refuses, and finally puts Kevin away for good.
That moment has been 1 year in the making in the mind of El Generico.
Months go by, and the realization that he is no longer a part of Ring of Honor gets to Kevin. He considers retiring once again, especially since he can't get back into the promotion he once considered his home. Kevin Steen even goes so far as to hijacking the ROH website to claim that one way or another, he was going to be back in Ring of Honor, and no one was going to do anything about it. Steve Corino brings Kevin back into the promotion, even though he's been banned, and even eventually down the line, turns his back on Steve Corino to become his own man, despite Steve teaching Kevin everything he knew about being an evil psychopath. Eventually, these two meet at Final Battle 2011, with Jimmy Jacobs as a special guest referee. If Kevin won that match, he would be reinstated into Ring of Honor, and he takes this opportunity to run it constantly in Jim Cornette's face that he was going to make his life miserable once he got back in. He destroys Steve Corino and Jimmy Jacobs and is about to kill Jim Cornette until El Generico makes the save. And the war is back on. The rivalry rolls into ROH and PWG respectively, with the two men constantly tearing away at each other in another series of matches. And then of course Steen, much to the chagrin of Jim Cornette, wins the Ring of Honor World title from Davey Richards at Border Wars. Kevin has accomplished his dream in his own sadistic way. He was going to take over the company, and Jim tries to throw everything at Kevin to force the Ring of Honor World title off of him, but Kevin continues to fight them all off. So Jim Cornette gets desperate and offers Kevin a present, someone who knows him very well, someone who can take the title away from him, someone who is his former best friend. Final Battle 2012 sees the Ring of Honor World Championship on the line in a ladder match. It's a good solid match, but it's nowhere close to the violent encounter that they had 2 years ago. They also had a much better ladder match for the PWG World title in my opinion. Steen wins the match once again after a devastating package pile driver through 2 ladders. Maybe Generico got lucky 2 years ago. Maybe it was never meant to be. He tries to get away from Kevin, but he ends up following him back into PWG, where one night the Young Bucks and Brian Cage are beating up Generico and referee Rick Knox with Kevin on commentary. There's this moment where all hope is lost for Generico. He has no one left. And Kevin started to feel remorse for his actions over the years. Maybe it's because he's sick of the violence. Maybe it's because he knows that it's becoming too much. Or maybe he knows something else. Maybe he just cares too much about Generico. He's not happy about it, but after all the stupid stuff he went through in Ring of Honor with Jim Cornette at the helm, how even the audience was starting to get behind the destruction that Steen was doing in his career, maybe this is what he was meant to do all along. Maybe this is how it was meant to be. And his friend needs him, now more than ever. And he jumps on the ring apron and extends his hand to El Generico, who hesitates. No, he can't. Too much has happened, but maybe it's finally time to forgive him. And he tags in Kevin, who cleans house. After the match is over, the two begin to argue as to why any of this was occurring. They can never get along again, can they? Especially later on when it's revealed that El Generico would be signing a contract to go work for the WWE, leaving Kevin behind. PWG officials make it clear that the two of them need to settle their differences in a special one-night-only tag team title tournament. This is El Generico's last night as an indie wrestler, and he's teaming up with a man who has brutalized him for years now once again. Really funny how professional wrestling can work sometimes, but this is probably much needed. This is finally the closure that we needed to see between the two. There was always that hope that these two would team up once again, even if both of them are not happy about it, and how little by little, throughout the night, despite arguing and bickering, despite the taunts by Kevin, they seem to work it out somehow. Not really understanding why, but teaming up together made them feel both alive again. But there is still animosity between the two. One assembly line later, and the unlikely duo throughout their whole lives somehow make their way to the finals for the PWG Tag Team titles. Their opponents, you may ask? Why, it's none other than the Young Bucks. The very same team where this all started, where at Final Battle 2009, they were the team that inadvertently caused all this mess to happen. And now they are once again the team that Kevin and Generico have to beat. Still as talented, still as cocky as ever, they give Generico and Steen a run for their money. On Generico's last night, every ounce of energy, every moment has led to this. They scratch and claw and try to destroy each other until Generico gains the upper hand, until they finally have an opportunity to redeem the loss they had nearly 4 years ago. Package pile driver, and then...
Roll through!
it's over. Then comes that moment. El Generico, on his last night, still being as high class as ever, still being too damn nice about everything, offers a hand to Kevin Steen, who walks away. Too much has happened. It can never work out again. If this were a movie, this would probably be the best ending for these two. However, we do have another chapter to get through because wrestling is truly a never-ending story. It's 2014, and both men have signed contracts to work for the WWE. El Generico has changed his persona. Now known as Sami Zayn, he has worked up the ranks of NXT's premier athletes under WWE's new developmental brand that has caught fire. And now they are having their third ever special show on the WWE network called NXT TakeOver R Evolution. It's an important time in Sami's life, as he is set to face Adrian Neville, aka Pac, for the NXT Championship. And if Sami loses, he might consider retiring from wrestling altogether. He knows he has a chance to win the big one. He is not going to come up short again, even against someone as talented as Neville. But there's another important event happening on this show: the debut of Kevin Owens. Kevin has also just recently signed a contract with the WWE and changed his last name as a tribute to not only the late great and fellow Canadian Owen Hart, but also as a tribute to his son. It was quite a shock when it was announced that Kevin would be coming to the WWE. After all, gone were the days of the Attitude Era, and have been replaced by the company with a more PG family-friendly type of organization. And Kevin Steen was the most non-PG wrestler out there at the time. How is any of this going to work? This can't happen. No way, he's too much of a liability. But Kevin does make it work. Not only is he still Mr. Wrestling, but he is also a man who is now a prize fighter. And he's going to do what he does best, and that's fight. He runs through CJ Parker, Juice Robinson for all the New Japan folks, despite suffering a broken nose because of a palm strike, and watches from the back to see his best friend Sami Zayn, a man who he's traveled with for years, finally win the NXT Championship in a thrilling contest of will and determination by both guys. As the NXT locker room empties out to celebrate, Kevin is the first one to the ring. He hops in and congratulates Sami on doing what neither of them thought was possible, and doing it on one of professional wrestling's biggest stages. It was the proper closure to El Generico and Kevin Steen, who lived happily ever after, taking care of Generico's children at the orphanage and the birth of Owens and Zayn. It was so picture perfect, and nothing at all could ruin this moment.
Kevin, goddammit.
Sami knew this was coming. He just got so caught up in the emotion of the moment that he forgot who this man truly was. Someone who did not want to wait at the back of the line like everyone else, especially since all of his own friends got called up before he did. Now he fights for a prize. He does it for more money because now he has his own family to take care of, whereas Sami doesn't have that sort of luxury. Back on the indies, Kevin was his family, and now his friend wanted to hurt him once again, forcing his way into an NXT title match despite not being named to the #1 contender, only because Sami Zayn wanted this match to happen. He wanted to end this again. And so at the next TakeOver event, the two once again bring their classic rivalry to the WWE, where Kevin Owens literally destroying Sami time and time again, hitting a symphony of powerbombs until the referee is forced to stop the match, awarding Kevin Owens the title. The prize fighter was victorious, and Sami Zayn once again came up short. At this point in the video, I would briefly go over all the other matches and moments that happened throughout the years, but honestly, I don't really want to, because after a while, I stopped caring about this, because, well, the WWE stopped caring about this rivalry. It started losing that magic that made it so compelling to watch when I was younger. They would team up again and then fight, and it was starting to get a little bit too repetitive for me, and even explaining some of the stuff that happened previously, for those of you that are still watching this by some miracle, it may start to get repetitive for you too. So why am I still talking about this? What's the point? Like, why is all this still happening? Why do I still continue to care about this rivalry again? I think it finally hit me when I was actually writing the script for this video, and it came full circle last year for me too. There's one last chapter that I do definitely want to talk about. And here we are at WrestleMania 37 Night 2. Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn are set to face each other once again, but this time the roles are reversed. Sami is presented as the heel here in this weird kind of outfit going on, which looking at him reminds me of Robin Williams during that park scene in Good Will Hunting, as a conspiracy nutcase who is trying to convince the world that everyone is out to get him, even going as far as gaining help from Logan Paul. Yes, that Logan Paul. And now Owens is here as the biggest babyface ever, and the two start to have their match. I was watching this match through my friend's Discord and made a comment about how this was like every other Steen and Generico match you ever seen, and you know what to expect. And that's when it finally hit me during the course of the match. This is Kevin Steen and El Generico, two guys that I grew up watching online and through DVDs having a match at WrestleMania, the granddaddy of them all, to an audience who has never seen these two work before and knows nothing about their previous history, but they don't care. They start to get behind this match because it's becoming a great match. This was their dream all along, to be together on wrestling's biggest stage. It's their dream come true. Also, Logan Paul took a stunner, so that was also pretty cool. It hit me back then, and it hits me now as I'm sitting here recording this. Why this rivalry is probably one of, if not my favorite rivalry in all of professional wrestling, and why it truly means so much to me. When I was in high school, I was going through a similar kind of situation with someone else. Without naming names, basically the whole dynamic and relationship between us turned sour. It was a very dark and depressing point in my life where I did not want to face anyone anymore. My anxiety was at an all-time high, and I did not feel like I had a place to belong. I did not know where to go or who to turn to, and I shut everyone out from my life. But I still had professional wrestling. And as goofy and silly as it can be sometimes, it was always there to give me comfort, to give me hope, and to make me believe. And when these two men fought each other back in 2010 during all those wars, I felt that exact emotion. I believed during the course of this situation that I was going through, I was El Generico, and this person was Kevin Steen. That person was the one who betrayed me and made my life miserable. That's why I related so much to this rivalry, because it was a horrible situation and I thought that acting out in violence was the only answer. How I believe this person and I can fight it out and one day mend our relationship together. I had to learn the hard way, of course, to move on from this, and it bugged me all these years why it felt like the rivalry stopped becoming so special to me, but now I feel like I truly get it. Kevin Steen and El Generico are the best of frenemies. They're on again and off again, and they're continuing to do so to this day, especially since both guys have recently re-signed their deals to continue to work for the WWE. And you know what? Good for them. I'm glad that they are happy where they're at and how they can continue to work for a place that they feel content on being at. I have this theory about the rivalry itself. It feels like they keep fighting each other because they don't know how to heal. They really do want to make it work out, but don't really know how to go about it. Maybe that might be me reading too much into this, but I've always believed that one day they can hug it out and have a retirement match with each other just for old time's sake. How we can have that beautiful ending back in 2012 in PWG. That's how I feel like most people want their own relationships to go. How sometimes when you or someone else hurts you in the way that they do, you sometimes want to try and fix the problem yourself instead of finding a solution, and how you have to actually take care of yourself. How you care so much about another person that you want things to get better between you two. And when it doesn't work out like it did for me back in high school, it breaks the heart so badly that you don't feel like continuing in life. Both these men in this rivalry have two different ideologies about being successful in professional wrestling, but have the same goals and aspirations as the other. And they've always wanted to do that together, because that's how it was always meant to be. This is why I love this rivalry so much, because they will more than likely fight again in the future. They will go through more stories together. They will want to work this out. And it's that sort of compassion for each other and the reliance that we have as humans in each other that makes this thing so amazing to watch. Even through all the battles, they care too much about each other to let the other one go. This rivalry, in a weird way, saved my life. It made me want to treat people better than I was treating myself at the time. And it hurts when someone else doesn't see your vision of life, but that's why it's so important to take care of yourself and find others who can heal you rather than hurt you. Steen and Generico constantly hurt and healed each other because of the love that's there. It's really touching to watch. And it may not mean as much to me as it did all those years ago, but I know that these two are going to do tremendous things with and without each other for years to come, until the end of time. Because for these two, that's how it was always meant to be, and what it truly is now. They are destined to do this forever. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for watching. If you're still at the end of this really long video, I do appreciate you letting me pour my heart out there at the end and showing you my love for this amazing rivalry. If you want to see me do more content like this, please feel free to leave a like on the video on your way out. And of course, I really appreciate if you do hit that subscribe button as well, and leave a comment about some of your favorite professional wrestling rivalries, and if you remember watching Kevin Steen and El Generico growing up and how much it meant to you. I would love to get a conversation like that going. But this has been long enough, so I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you all again so much for watching. I hope you really enjoyed this whole little thing that I did. And until next time, you guys, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.